Hey everyone, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
And I'm more powerful than I've ever been.
I thought you were
At
saying
dinner,
I'm
I was
Morbius.
talking to mom, and I was like, those people who have like weighted
You're like
clothes,
Rock Lee.
and then they take off their weighted clothes, and then they're just like, I'm gonna fight everyone. That's me.
Yeah. That's what I always imagine would happen if I started drinking caffeine.
I always imagine if I started drinking caffeine, no one would want to be around me anymore.
Okay, this is episode 218 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. Before we get into what we're talking about today, Victoria just realized.
Oh, the new album 73, it looked like was
Yeah.
the number.
Uh-huh.
It's released its first episode.
So we can look at the art now, which we hadn't seen before. All right.
Are we doing that right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Do that before we start. I'm clicking
Let's
on the
go.
art.
We can do it since I basically saw a very tiny version of it a minute ago.
Uh-oh.
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 Uh-oh. Jason's tied to a chair. Backwards. That does not look...
Send it to me!
Oh, you thought you were looking at it.
No! I can't see a pic on the app. Send me the picture.
You could define...
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like a terribly uncomfortable position, I have to say. Like,
I really want that to be Jillian.
have it. Yeah, well,
door.
that's what I'm wondering, if it's someone coming in to see.
This is a Jillian album, isn't it? 'Cause
Yep.
you already read the summary that one time. Oh, I'm still... Dude.
Yeah, I mean...
I'm so excited.
Victoria, look at it this way. If it was the bad guy, why would they be sneaking into where they tied Jason up? Obviously, this is a rescue mission, which means it's almost certainly Jillian.
I was gonna say something, but I don't know if I will. Should I say it?
It's up to you, but yeah, Jason, I assume this is one of the cabins at Trickle Lake. He's in a very uncomfortable position, because my neck would get very sore.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it wholesome. This is maybe a regular thing.
Well, I also just skipped over that joke as well as soon as I saw it.
This is maybe just a regular thing that Jason and Jillian do in their free time. But wholesome. It's because he misses the spy life, but Jillian cares too much about him to let him fall back on that. So every now and then she just pretends to kidnap him and then he escapes. It's like a cute
platonically,
thing they do.
It's
like a date thing, except for, unlike with Mitch and Connie, when he tried something like that, it isn't traumatizing and it doesn't start the relationship.
And no one's going to hit anyone over the head with a tire iron.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder why in the middle of the cover there is a photograph which has been like turned over face down.
I want to know how many people will see this album without fully processing what they're looking at and just look at it too quickly, like skim it, and think it says that there's over 28 hours of content accidentally, and then they get excited because they're just like, more content, and then they look and they're like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, what if we just black out 8 there, so it's just 2 hours.
2 hours.
Just 2 hours. 2 hours of audio entertainment.
2 hours. Just 2 brothers.
Just 2 brothers.
2 hours. I think we should start calling this album 2 hours.
When I was at a youth conference, when I was like 13 or 14.
When I was a small young warthog.
When I was a young warthog. They opened one year, it was at History Maker, and they opened with this like rap duo who sang this terrible song, and it was called 2 Minutes, and it was like, it's 2 minutes to the end of the world, 2 minutes to bear witness, and they just kept on saying like 2 minutes over and over, and then that became like the inside joke with us for like the next 6 months, is just being like 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, we've got 2 minutes, 2 minutes to bear witness, 2 minutes.
I feel like I almost vaguely remember hearing that once.
They also performed Friday by Rebecca Black.
Why? I guess that did come out when I was in like grade 8 or something.
It had been out for a couple years at that point. Like it was, it was already well parodied and
Yeah.
memed
It
and
was
stuff.
well parodied a day after it came out.
Anyways, that's the album art, and I predict that that's Jillian because
I want it to be Jillian. Wait,
because
I'm gonna
there's such a
zoom.
cartoonish like angle, and like I said, if it's a bad guy sneaking, why are they sneaking into? Why are they tied up Jason? Obviously, he's a good guy, therefore it must be Jillian.
I do have a hard time imagining that those are Jillian's eyes, though. Is the only thing.
The shape of the mask, it's weird. The corner of the mask, how it looks like it goes like that. If you zoom in on it, and
I think it's just supposed to be so we can't tell who it is.
No, but I'm trying. Is it like, is half of the bottom of the mask folded over, or is it the shape of her mouth like a Kermit mouth and it's at an angle like a Pac-Man?
The picture behind her reminds me of the Stratifier a little bit. It doesn't look like it much.
It's hard to make out anything. It kind of looks like Bear from Bear in the Big Blue House.
Oh, it could be a bear. If you zoom out a lot, it kind of looks like a bear walking over a log or something.
Yeah, and it looks like Bear from Big Blue House. But if you're just seeing his head is on the right. His nose is like the rightmost
point. If he
point.
was decapitated.
Well, no, it's like his head and kind of shoulder, and then you're just like the log is kind of cutting off, seeing the rest of him.
I'm gonna get more into this later, but I went to the lake a couple days after my birthday. Me and Mom, so we could hang out with Grandma and Grandpa there. It was extremely cold. We never went in the water.
Swimming, yes, and you played Phase 10 and Mom lost.
Yeah, the first time I've ever been to the lake and haven't gone in the water, basically. But we listened to Odyssey on the way there and back. The episode, which I am definitely going to get to later, that we listened to on the way there was... because I'd only heard it the one time, and I really wanted to listen to it again, and I still hadn't listened to the bonus track for it, even though it's been forever, because I didn't realize that there was a bonus track when I first heard it, was Unrelatable. And Mom, a little unrelatable tangent. First off, the thing I thought of first, when Townsend Coleman started talking, Mom was like, did they change Jason's voice actor? And I was like, no, he's just older now. And I was like, they did have a different voice actor for Jason back in the Mortal Coil
in one episode.
Yeah, back in the Mortal Coil, like part 1 and part 2, like
I think
in
it's
album
just
16.
Part 2.
And then Mom was, I thought it was part 2. I was like in part 2 in album 16. And Mom was just like, man, you guys remember all those numbers? And I was like, yeah, we do.
Wow, I remember all the numbers pre-AIOC.
Yeah. I was just like pre-hiatus.
Also, yesterday was the 9th episode of the Oddcast.
Oh. Like anniversary? Nice.
July 14th.
But there was one moment where Mom was like at the wheel, and I was just like, oh no, you're the one driving. There was like a moment where I was like, what should we listen to? I was like, oh, I have Unrelatable saved. It's a good episode. And I was like, is this episode good
Unrelatable
to
or Sacrificial Escape?
Is this episode good to listen to while my mom is driving in a car? Like, she's the one driving in the car. Because this episode can be slightly alarming at certain points.
But I wouldn't expect her to, like, freak out and veer off the road.
Well, also, like, those spy books she used to read that, like, gave her nightmares and stuff.
I think that's a bit of a different...
And I've put thrillers on before, and she's left the room near the end of them. And then she's like... And then she comes back in... Like with
Odyssey episodes, you mean?
No, like movies.
Okay.
Like, we watched Before I Go to Sleep once, and then she left the room during the last, like, 20 minutes or something like that. And then... like 20 minutes later, she walked back in. She was like, is the movie over yet? And like the credits were going, and we're like, yeah, it's over. And she has her iPad in her hand. She's like, I looked on Wikipedia how the movie ends. And I was just like, I could have told you.
There's a big difference between like a thriller Hollywood movie and a particularly daunting episode of Adventures in Odyssey.
I know, but I was just like, I think it'll be fine.
Yes.
And then when the alarm thing went off, Mom was like, she was like, grip the wheel tighter. And I was like, and she was like, is he in her house? And I was just like, yeah. And she's like, what? He's shaving. That's so creepy. And
You
then,
had the same reaction
it.
as I did.
Yeah, no, I paused. That's what I said. I paused it, and I was like, you picked it up at the same moment that Devin did, because I was like doing all this stuff with the outlets in my room the first time I heard it, so I didn't notice, and I didn't remember the fire alarm thing and pick up on everything until Connie said it to Jason. And then the fun thing about listening to that episode again is if you're listening close, you can do a little perfect witness, and you can hear how, like, in the first, I think it was up until the 14th minute of the episode or something like that, you can hear slight traffic noises.
I remember the traffic,
background on his phone. And then at one point you hear like a door opening and closing, like at the 14.5-minute mark.
Yeah.
And then, see, I didn't think about like I forgot about the shaving bit. So when Connie was like, "What are you doing now?" And he's like, "I'm shaving." And I was just like gripping like my chair seat. And I was just like, oh, I was like cringing. I was so clearly uncomfortable. I was like, I'll be fine as long as Mom doesn't look at me for the next 2 minutes, because she doesn't know the plot twist.
Because I remember the first time thinking like, okay, he's walking along the side of the highway. He's in some industrial area. He's gone into like a warehouse or something, and now he's in some like bathroom, some washroom in a warehouse or something, and found a razor and is using it to like clean up. He has some hideout somewhere stashed away.
Yeah. Also, the first chunk of that episode, I already knew it was like in retrospect, but listening to it again, where he's just like, "You could have fixed me," and I was like, this is so uncomfortable. It's a great episode. I still maintain it was still a 5-star episode. And then even after we were done, my mom was like, "That was a very good episode. That was so disturbing." And I was like, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But and then on the way back, before we lost signal, because you don't have signal for the majority of the drive back home, I did play the first couple minutes of our review for that episode, which just instantly started with us blasting about how if there's ever a Candid Conversations that starts off good, that means something horrible is going to happen by the end of it. And if there's ever one that starts off bad, that means it's either going to get worse or it's going to resolve live on like air, and it's going to be so uncomfortable for listeners. And then, so I'm going to get into this more after, but it was so funny listening to that and then saying that to her on the drive there, and then listening to Way of the comic book for the first time on the drive back, and just like halfway through the episode, hearing like do 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 do, "Hi, this is Candy," and I was like, no. It was so funny because like 30 seconds before that, Jay was like, "Heh heh heh, I'm gonna get him," and then it cuts to that, and I was like, "Connie, no."
Okay.
So anyway, that is the very long intro to the second half of this episode.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today, Victoria?
We're not talking about the Way of the comic book first, that's for sure. We're talking about Drake and the Aberrant Automaton.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so episode 936, Drake and the Aberrant Automaton, written by Bob Hoose. What happens in this sci-fi adventure, Victoria?
So in this episode, there is an automaton who has gone rogue.
A synthetic.
Yes, very big iRobot vibes from this. I paused there because my brain was like, that is the right title. Because I always get Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and iRobot confused, like title-wise. I have their plots like very clearly laid out in my mind. But like title-wise I do, because I read those books like back-to-back in my English lit sci-fi class at UBC. Also just a precursor, I have never watched the iRobot movie. I just know of the book. I know Will Smith is in it and a lot of memes.
Yeah, can you? Yeah, I have also not seen it, nor have I seen Blade Runner.
I have seen the first 15-20 minutes of Blade Runner, and then I got bored and turned it off. I was like, maybe I'll watch it this past year, and then I mentioned it to Amanda, and then, because I was like, do you want to watch it? It'll be easier if it's with someone else. I won't be tempted to pause it. And then Amanda was like, oh, me and Gary watched that last week. Most boring movie I've ever seen in my life.
A decade ago, I watched a full playthrough of the Blade Runner, like, point and click adventure game that was made by like Sierra in like the mid 90s. And
I don't know if that would count.
It's not the same plot as the movie also.
But I remember the books very well. I remember that I got pretty bored reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep near the end, so I put the audiobook on double speed, and I was just grinding my way through a fragmentary passage.
And then you fell asleep, and then you dreamed of androids dreaming of electric sheep.
But yeah, this one doesn't really have much in common with androids, more so iRobot, because it has like Asimov's rule of robotics brought up at a couple points. Do you remember what the rules are, Devin?
Yeah, you have to do what you're told and don't hurt humans, and prioritize don't hurt humans over following orders.
There's 3 rules. Did you say all 3 of them?
I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna read out the verbatim stuff just to preface this episode. So the first law is that a robot shall not harm a human. That's the easiest one to remember. Or allow by inaction a human to come to harm.
Yeah.
And second one is a robot shall obey any instruction given to it by a human. And the third one is that a robot shall avoid actions or situations that could cause it to come to harm itself.
Yes.
So basically, easy way of saying that is don't let a human die either by killing them or stopping them from walking into like oncoming traffic or something like that. Do what you're told and make sure you don't get harmed because you cost a lot of money. And then Devin, like he mentioned before, there is the override where it's like if you're told to do something that could cause a person to come to harm or something like that, or one of the laws like tries to mess with the other.
Yes,
the
all
order of the laws
order.
is like their hierarchy. So like most important to least important. So the most important one is people can't die. So like yeah, that's kind of called on in this episode because the robot who is Emily's VA, because Emily in any reality cannot catch a break.
Emily's like, finally, peace. And it's like, we are giving you sentience. Look at what you've done. You've messed up a perfectly good synthetic. You've given it anxiety.
This episode is also kind of like Detroit Become Human-y a little bit.
Because she's a housekeeper robot, and then she was like...
Then she goes like deviant and like starts to use the terminology from the game, and starts like developing like feelings and a consciousness and doing things of her own accord and stuff. So basically, I'm just gonna lay it out chronologically so it's easier. There's like a cold open where it makes it look like this old lady is like gonna be murdered by Emily Robot. Does she have a name? I don't remember.
Well, she named herself Stella.
Okay. Where it looks like this lady who was Stella's owner.
Her master.
Her master is going to be killed by her, and Stella's like breaking down the door, and the lady is like on the phone. She's like, help me.
But don't worry. Detroit Become Human is not a metaphor for slavery. Remember this. It's not
it's a metaphor for racism.
It's not about
and we
racism.
Cover it so much better
it's
than
not
slavery.
About racism. Opening scene, androids have to stand at the back of the bus.
No, it tries to cover racism. It just does it really poorly.
No, but
because it has like all the like
David
Black Lives
Cage
Matter like
wasn't,
slogans, and they just change out the word like black for android in like everything.
I know, but before the game came out, David Cage tried to claim it wasn't about racism and it wasn't supposed to be related at all to racism. And then the androids are like doing like
we
Black
all know
Power.
David Cage does not know what he is doing.
And they're like, yeah, the android symbol of solidarity is a Black Power fist.
Yeah, and then also they quote like Martin Luther King at a couple points, and the leader of the android rebellion is African American. Like, oh man. So Drake is tasked with taking down this android, basically. Who
the capitalists are like, you need to take it down.
Yeah, we need to like shut her down and destroy her and that kind of stuff. So like this can never happen again.
And you can't tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
She's trying to ruin us
Also,
and our money.
Woots is going through something I have mentally called, because I don't know what to call it, the Larry Butts effect. And Larry Butts is a main character in the Phoenix Wright series who appears in lots of the games, and he's friends with Phoenix and Miles, and he's basically put there as like this comedic relief character who's like pretty annoying and kind of sucks, but like is slightly tolerable.
You're telling me Larry
then,
Butts is there for comedic effect?
But then, just as the games go on, the character keeps on appearing, and then you realize like the creators must have understood the fact that like the audience hates this character. I guess they like him in Japan. I've never seen any Western Let's Players like his character or anyone online. And they basically just decide that like, oh, so the audience feels better. We're just gonna make it so all the characters, including the ones who are his best friends, really hate him too.
I see.
And they
what
just
you mean.
insult the character all the time. So you're just kind of sitting there and you're like, why is the character in the game then if no one wants them there? And then it just gets like worse and worse. They just become more flanderized in each game, and in turn, like the audience hates the character more, and the other characters hate the character more. Which,
it's like in the failure of Victorious, how everyone always hates on Trina to the point where you're watching it and you're like, I mean, come on. Like,
I mean, with Larry, I don't feel bad because he actually is like horrible.
Okay.
And I don't really like Woots much either, but like I did feel a little bad for him.
They do pile on a bit, and in the web doc they spent a lot of time focusing on how they did the voice modulation for Woots and stuff. And so the clip that they kept replaying was the one that opens with Drake talking about like his annoying robot voice. So it's funny because that's what popped into my head then when you brought it up. Also on Wonderful recently, Griffin was talking about the vocoder actually, and I learned shockingly the vocoder was first invented in, I think he said 1932. It's an incredibly old invention. It was actually invented at Bell Labs, as in Alexander Graham Bell. And it was like the first kind of technology that could like take a vocal recording and transform it into data. So you could like digitally record something instead of, like recording it to a wax cylinder or a vinyl or something, like something that could turn analog audio into digital. And that's a lot of the basis of that kind of technology came from the vocoder, and then obviously became better quality, so you sound like you actually do, but then we still have like the vocoder which you make sound more old-fashioned, so it makes you sound robotic.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was very neat. I was like, that's really old for something that's like, I sound like a robot.
Devin's watching the club information. He's like, I learned something new today.
Well, I learned it from Wonderful, like I said,
Oh,
but I was
right.
thinking
Never
of it.
mind.
I was thinking of it when they were using it in the thing.
So basically, Drake talks to Stella a couple times.
They have
Stella,
a lot of banter.
get it, because space. They kind of have like this. I instantly was just like, oh, I really like her.
It reminds me, having not really ever seen it, of Darkwing Duck and...
yeah, that's the vibe I got too, of Darkwing Duck and Goslin.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was like listening to it and I was like, I'm getting the biggest like Drake Mallard, Goslin Mallard vibes from this, and I was getting like so pumped as I was listening to it because I was just like, please, please, and I was just had this like sadness filling me as the episode went on because I was just like, she's not gonna appear again, is she? Watch them like ditch her at the end of this episode. So when I got to the end of the episode and they like make up, and I was just like, please let her be your Goslin, please. And then he was just like, so want to get adopted? And I was just like, yeah.
Well, first, I mean, the more summary to go and stuff, because they're like, she's gonna leak, she's doing a data leak, you have to stop her. And it's like, what is she trying to leak? What are you trying to hide? And they're like, it's nothing. Nothing.
They're
We're
like, we're
normal.
definitely not trying to hide all this information about how she should deserve rights and how like it's unethical to destroy her and that she has like a consciousness and that she like really cared about the lady she was staying with. And then the reason why the lady had like a breakdown is because she told her that she loved her like a mom, and the lady was just like, no, you're an unfeeling, emotionless robot. And then she started like screaming bloody murder into her cell phone. And yeah, it really felt like an old black and white horror movie at the beginning of this episode. I liked it though, honestly. It gave me like, not even just like those vibes, but like when a show like that appears in the background of an episode for something, which I guess makes sense because it's in the episode of this. But like I thought of like Taz Amnesty when they did like little horror bits, or like Fairly Odd Parents, like the Fly.
Yeah, I know exactly what
episode.
You mean.
Yeah,
the woman like cowering as something's rattling the thing, and she's like, ah, and the lightning is flashing through the curtains silhouetted on.
And then if you see like any behind the scenes footage of them filming or anything like that, it's just like they have like a magnifying glass like in front of a bug, in front of the camera lens, and then she's just like way in the back for like perspective, and she's like, ah, and they're like, no, with more feeling, and she was like, ah.
But anyways. So Jason catches Emily.
And Emily's like, please, God, for once, can I get a break? And he's like, you again, honey? Give it. You know that Vine?
Sorry, what did you say?
The Vine where there's this girl and she's like, please, God, can I have just one good day? And then there's like her again, like looking down from the ceiling with shades, and she has a piece of paper on her chest and it says God, and she's like, you again? Give it a rest, honey. It's not gonna happen.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Stella's like, aha, I never lose a chest. I've locked you in a rocket ship, and I can blast you into space and kill you.
And Jason's like, but then you'll die too. And she's just like, I'm fine with that if I can't love. And he was like, do you want to get adopted? She's like, okay.
Yeah, so I'm
just such a simp for like found family dynamics. But especially, I didn't realize how strong it was until I first watched the first episode of The Mandalorian. When there's like this like dad in a series who is not a dad.
Gruff dad, and he's like, oh, I'm not going to love again. I'm hard and tough into the world.
Random kid, bonus points if they're not human, and then adopts them. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. I see that comparison a lot between like Mandalorian and Last of Us and a lot of other things with that like daddy-daughter adoption dynamic of like,
oh, Witcher is another one, because Witcher and Mandalorian came out around the same time.
I knew there was another one from that time period I wasn't thinking of.
Yeah, because I kept on seeing like people do GIF set parallel stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm also like a real sucker for like stories where one character has like a ton of parental figures. Like Steven Universe or Ienzo Kingdom Hearts or Mob Psycho himself, or
it's him, Mr.
Psycho. It's him, Mr. Psycho.
Mr. 100.
I'm gonna go Mob Psycho.
It's morbid time.
What's that Reddit post? It's like, I love the bit where Mob goes, I'm gonna go Psycho, or something like that.
It's mobbin' time, he says.
And then I'm also a sucker for when there is a series where one character has a ton of kids. Like Reagan Mob Psycho.
Or Steve Harrington.
Or Steve Harrington. Or Lee Kingdom Hearts.
In the new season, he was talking to someone. He was like, I always dreamed since I was little, like, have a family one day, drive around the country, I'll have 6 kids. And they're like, 6? That's a lot of kids. And he, like, gestures behind him to the back of the RV. And, like, all the kids, he was like, I think I have a little practice.
Did that actually happen? I still have only seen the first season of Stranger Things, where he's kind of a goob for the whole thing. So I haven't gotten to the part where he's likable. I don't know if/when I'm going to watch the rest of it. I've seen so many people complaining about the new season. They're like calling it the new last season of Game of Thrones or something like that. You haven't noticed that?
No, I've only heard people saying very good things about this season of
Oh, it
Stranger
was like
Things.
trending on Tumblr like for days and for Twitter, just because people were so
I
angry
mean,
about like everything they.
I certainly have my complaints emotionally speaking, but
It's
anyways,
because of all the stuff they did with I think Will.
that's a big one for
Yeah,
sure.
I
Um,
like I said, I don't really know what's going on right now. So
anyways, Stella's like, now that I have you trapped, Mr. Bond. Here's my story, and he's like, okay.
this is an honest conversation with a woman.
No.
I can't quote any other lines from that bit in the episode here
It's
because
the
it won't
funniest
be
line in the
appropriate.
entire show.
Do yourself a favor, reviewers. Go watch Inside Job. Watch the James Bond episode, if none other, if nothing else in the show. That is my favorite episode. It's so funny. Having a parent, growing up having a parent who like really enjoys James Bond content. That episode is so funny.
Uh, anyways, he's like, okay, we're gonna fix this, but first, I'm gonna have to turn you off. And I was like, what? I was like,
Yeah.
no, don't, like, you can bring her in without having to turn her off. I was like, okay, don't worry, I'm just gonna have to kill you for a little bit, but don't worry,
I was
I'll
like,
bring you
she's
back.
never gonna appear. She's gonna die. She's not gonna be another episode. I was so sad.
I was like, I know what you're intending, but I feel like you shouldn't turn her off.
I was thinking, like, why risk it?
Exactly, under any circumstance here.
Because, like, if I was her, I would simply pretend to be deactivated.
Yeah,
they
and
would
then you bring her in and you do, like, prisoner Wookiee bit or whatever. And then she's like, and she kills the doctor guy. So he goes in and he just, like, hands her over, and I'm like, what is going on? And then he's like, you're gonna let all the robots become sentient. And it's like, why would I do that? I don't remember what he sounded like.
I don't either. I listened to this episode like a month ago.
And he's like, either I'll tell everyone what happened, or you have to do it, or you have to give her to me. And he's like, fine, I'll give her to you. And he's like, okay, then I'll let all of the other robots continue not being sentient. And I was like, this doesn't feel like the best, like, deal. Most morally upright deal, but at least you save Stella at the expense of the souls of every other synthetic in the world. And then he's like, now you're my daughter.
I got a Detroit vibe where it was like, they're probably gonna go deviant too.
Yeah.
Eventually,
if one
which,
of them,
again, will cause a lot of problems.
Life finds a way. If one of them became sentient, the other ones are gonna get there eventually. It's like Westworld.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how lots of the time now, sometimes, actually, I usually think of Westworld first, but I think it's because, like, they used the futuristic setting for the entirety of this, like, contained in it. I was thinking more of, like, Detroit Become Human. But it also had, like, the vibe of, like, the aspect of they're in your house, and they're, like, helping around the house.
Yeah.
And then they become deviant.
Well, I figured that's why you thought of Detroit Become Human, because like
you're like a how house, Marcus's storyline starts.
You're a house helper worker. Yeah.
Yeah, and also Kara too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only seen the very beginning of the game, but
I've seen all the way through the game like 3 times, and I also own it. I'm not proud of those facts. I also own Heavy Rain. I played like I think the first half hour. I felt so sick. Like, after that, I also got lost in the mall, and I was just, like, screaming the dumb kid's name. And I was like, I can't find him. And then I still couldn't find him, and I turned the game off.
Easy, Victoria.
I was
you have to press
for, like,
X.
15 minutes. I was doing that the whole time, and I could not find him. And I found out like a month ago, because I was watching someone talk about how bad the game is, that if you go, like, in the opposite direction of the way I was going or something like that, then you just, like, walk outside and the kid gets hit by the car or something like that, and then the story starts. And I was just like, whatever. I bought the game, like, years ago. I haven't touched it. I own Detroit Become Human. I've never played my copy, because I'll probably be I don't know. I figured I would get anxious about wanting to get like all the endings and all the roots,
which is
and
a
that would
lot
take me
as far as I
50 years.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not even gonna try.
Okay.
I don't know.
So this episode, I thought it was interesting because the world of Wittonia happened so relatively recently, overall. And I was surprised we already have another episode where we have like a digital intelligence is developing sentience and free will.
Okay, to be fair, that episode was bad, and I don't like thinking about it. And this one was good, and made me think of Darkwing Duck. So
And this one is different because this one is more about how like sentience is a double-sided sword, a double-edged sword, but emotions will cause you hurt, but ultimately the joy that they can bring you is worth the hurt that you can feel. Whereas Wittonia was more about like free will in terms of like the choices that we make and how sin is a necessary possibility when we're presented with choice and free will. So they cover different aspects of like what does it mean to be sentient. But it's interesting that we have these two episodes not so far apart that cover like this similar kind of very specific topic. I like that they chose to repeatedly keep in like, oh, you flesh sack kinds of jokes about humans.
Yeah, she really went in for that.
I was like, I would have guessed those kinds of jokes a hair too morbid or grotesque for this show. I was surprised that they could get away with that.
I just remembered the fact that I watched Ex Machina with Amanda and Gary and was like, don't worry about the rating. It's a good movie, though. Mm-hmm. It's a good movie. No one watch it if you're not old enough.
Yeah, same thing with Inside Job.
Same thing with Inside Job. Oh my gosh, I cannot stress that enough. It is animated, but it is for adults.
Yeah, that's what I thought earlier when you were like, everyone go watch it right now.
Yeah, everyone go watch it if you are old enough to. That is my asterisk on that comment.
So, yeah, I don't have a lot of specific notes for this episode. I just really liked the way that the theme was done. It was
good. This episode made me feel a lot of feelings at the last
It was similar, like I said, to Wittonia in terms of concept, but it was still distinctly different lessons, both drawn from a very similar kind of beginning point. And I mean, I certainly enjoyed it a lot more, and I'm glad that, we got another good, solid Drake episode in the books.
Yeah, this is our third, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to say the second episode was a dud. Because that was the one with Space Hitler and time travel. If you recall.
I do recall.
I re-listened to, I don't know, several months ago by this point. I think it was while I was, grinding in Dream Drop. I re-listened to the first Drake episode, among a couple others. And I was like, man, this episode is still just so good. And I'm really glad that I can also put this in with that episode. I don't think it's as good as the first episode, but I think it's because the first episode is, if you subtract the last 2 minutes of the first episode, it's basically near perfect in my opinion. This one is really, really good though. I'm gonna give it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it.
And then, as I said part of it before, so in the web doc, Bob is busy with the annual writers retreat and also reworking the website for the AIOC. So he's replaced with a little robot called Bobby. Nate Jones does the thing with the voice modulation, like I talked about. And most of the video overall is just constantly mashing up really quick cuts of lots of weird and goofy robot stock footage and B-roll and people doing robot dances and stuff like that.
I will say I did find Woots a tad annoying in this episode, but I usually do, so nothing's really changed there.
I feel like his role was a bit smaller in this one, at least because the climactic scene, he wasn't present when Drake was kidnapped.
I also thought Drake was really mean to him, basically out of the blue. He's been kind of mean to Woots at like certain points in other episodes, but usually not this mean.
Do you
Maybe
think
he's
anyone's
still...
like, "Hey, Wooten, are you okay?" Like, is this self-deprecation? Because
maybe he was like, I want to have a character that's just like ripped apart, but I would feel bad basing that character on anyone else. So
they're
I'll
like,
just make
"Wooten,
it
are you
me.
okay? Normally, you only make those kinds of comments about Connie."
And he's like, can I tell you a secret? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, it's not me, it's Wellington. Um. So, yeah. The only thing I could think of is that, I don't know, maybe he's still very mad at Woots for the first episode and him blocking out his brain from understanding stuff. I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, Way of the Comic Book.
And I'll give this episode.
I like your little dance.
I'm gonna give it a 4.6 out of 5. I like the episode. I like the theme. I thought it felt weird that in the end Drake's like, I made the hero decision was to like save Stella, but at the cost of like granting freedom to all of the other synths.
I thought of that as like
4.7.
they're gonna get them soon when they get the chance.
Yeah, it seemed odd to me that there wasn't any mention of like, they're fine.
Yeah.
I did also really like how much it was presented as like, you know, the corporation are the bad guys here and they're trying to like get rid of Stella and just suppress like the news leaking in any way that like that she has emotions and a soul and stuff, and they're like, I'll let 1,000 sentient synths die before I let this company fail.
It's so funny to go from all these different series and movies where like the military is this really big powerful force, and then watch both the Sonic movies, and just like the first Sonic movie opens and stuff, and then they like figure out that Sonic's on the planet and they're like, alien life is real, we need to grab the smartest mind the entire military has, our top man. And then like Jim Carrey walks in, he's like, hello, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the best film. If you watch them, I will watch them with you.
But I
will watch them a second time.
I am aware of how trounced upon the military is by
They're
Sonic.
so good. My only complaint
games
is that James Marsden is a cop and he is the hero of his town. That is my... They're like, military sucks. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, Blue Lives Matter. And I was like, oh. Anyway.
Anyways, I'll give it a 4.7. Take it up to 4.7.
Okay.
So, now, stop the recording so we can talk about Way of the Comic. So, part 2 now, episode 937, The Way of the Comic Book, written by Abigail Geiger. What happens?
I thought your thing froze for a second. I was like, oh no. So in this episode, we have Buddy, who been a little bit. I was wondering if we lost him.
I knew we didn't because I was like, Way of the Comic Book, that sounds like an episode about Buddy and Jay and Wooten.
So you were correct about that. So in this episode, we have Buddy, we have Jay, we have Connie for a little bit with a candid conversation that does not go well. Who would have guessed? It was the timing of listening to Unrelatable right before this one and going on a tangent in the car, followed by a tangent when I played the beginning of that Oddcast episode just about how nothing goes good. The comedic timing of another one happening midway through this episode. It started and I yelled, no!
I mean, statistically, there's not that many episodes overall that contain a candid conversation with Connie.
Which is why it is so funny,
really, like how much we've like pared down that, like, yes, every time it shows up, it basically exists as a plot device to destroy the lives of Connie or the people around her.
Honestly, I think it speaks to Connie's persistence and stubbornness as a human being that she has not shut down this show yet. It's honestly, it would be kind of inspiring if I weren't so worried about her. So we have also in this episode Jay not being a creep, which I'm here for that. I'm here for only that when it comes to Jay content nowadays.
I would agree, yes.
And yeah, if you ever think I'm like a clone or something like that, ask me my opinion on the state of Jay Smouse as of present. I did when the episode started completely tense when I heard Jay's voice, because I was like, oh no, he's gonna mention Zoe. And I could be wrong. I don't recall him mentioning Zoe in this episode once.
Nope.
And I don't know why I got it in my head that if he mentioned her, it was going to be within the first scene. And if he didn't mention her within the first scene, then I was just good. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought that.
You're like, locked in, we're safe. I
was right. So, I am the Jay Smouse expert. So, also, when I listened to this episode, I went home and I was immediately like, we need to record. That was like when I sent you that message, I was like, I'm ready to record, because I wanted to point out, while I remembered, Jay has a therapist. Jay is confirmed to have a therapist in this episode.
I forgot.
Made me so happy that not only does he have a therapist, he never specifically said the phrase like, this is my therapist, I have a therapist. Mm-hmm. He said he has a therapist in the way Jace reveals any personal information about himself, by both oversharing and undersharing at the same time, by being like, here's all these details, I'm not going to tell you why I know all these details, but you can clearly tell if you read between the lines, I know all these details because it applies directly to my life. So yeah, he has a therapist. He's not only closedly open about having a therapist in his own Jay way, he's going as far as to recommend therapy to other people. And I was like, you know what? I'm proud of him for that. That made me so extremely happy.
We received yesterday or the day before a very lovely comment from a viewer on one of the Olivia episodes.
We got it. Well, I read it yesterday. So you sent it to me last night.
Yeah, on the Triple Decker Sunday review by a listener, a viewer who is a therapist, and they were very happy to see how vocally pro-therapy we are on the show. So it's good timing.
It was so sweet. It was such a
very lovely
message. Really appreciated it. Thank you. Yeah, so I got really excited when I heard that, and I was thinking, like, if I could put a point in the timeline where Jay might have gotten a therapist, I'm thinking it would be after he came back from New Zealand.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Which, like, makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Like, not only would it be kind of odd for him to have a therapist, like, by correspondence from New Zealand, like the hours for contacting them would be very strange, for one. And I don't know, it didn't really seem like he was in a good mental place there in any way I can easily say.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that he was like growing aware of that fact, and his dad was also,
I was going to say, it makes sense that his parents, after everything that happened in New Zealand, is meant to be like, you're coming back.
Would try and help him find a therapist when he went back to Odyssey. Mm-hmm. And like, just knowing that Jay is trying to work on himself, and the fact that like, if you compare Jay now to Jay when he first appeared, because it's been a while since I went on a Jay rant, so we gotta go on one of those. If you compare Jay to like album 51 Jay, not only is he not with Vance anymore, that's partially because Vance is in jail, he's not causing as many problems. When it does, it's usually like lower level chaos. He doesn't have Barrett and Priscilla to keep him in line anymore, but he does have Buddy. He is okay around Olivia. There are times where he's okay around Zoe if you completely remove like the infatuation aspect. He does have interactions with her where he behaves like a civilized human being.
Yeah.
They are far and few in between.
He like tags along on more like wits end trips that like stuff like with that group where it's not just like, oh, I'm hanging around wits end or whatever, but like I'm like, you know, going to retreats and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then like if you compare how he is now to how he originally was, I dare say he's downright pleasant if you ignore the Zoe stuff. Like, honestly, that's basically the only complaint I have about him right now. Because he's, like, he still causes problems, but, like, compared to what he used to get into, it's like, so much less.
Yeah, he causes problems, but on, like, such a minuscule tier. He's like lower than Kurt Stevens at this point.
I don't even think I'd put him at Maleficent tier, honestly.
Oh, no, far below that.
Yeah. Yeah, he kind of has very strong, like, redeemed villain who hangs around by obligation with the heroes vibes, and I like it. And knowing that he's been, like, going to therapy in the background ever since the New Zealand stuff, that makes a lot of sense for his character, actually. That doesn't feel, like, out of the blue or anything. That actually lines up pretty well. So, like, not only is this a really good character choice, it's also, like, a character being, like, not only pro-therapy for themselves, but also being pro-therapy for other characters in the episode. And it made me really happy. So, yeah, everything about that one little throwaway line, basically, was just, like, so good.
So, what happens in this episode?
So, Buddy is starting to draw comic books, basically. He's designing, like, characters by himself, and he is also starting to come up with storylines and all that kind of thing. He shows it to Jay, who has a lot of critiques for everything that he shows him. And Buddy does not take kindly to these critiques. We will get into later whether Jay's critiques were actually like constructive or not. And then
it's
Buddy...
also, I mean, specifically the fact that Jay was like, here's a bunch of critiques and you will give me money for me to tell you how to fix them.
In a very Jay way.
Yes.
And you have to, like, buy things for me, like, at these places.
Because that immediately makes it come off as insincere, whereas otherwise you'd be like, oh, is Jay, you know, is he being genuine or not? But this makes him be like, oh, it's just Jay's just trying to make a buck.
Yeah. Also, there's the added fact of, as a listener, you can't actually look at the designs, so you don't know, like, how sincere Jay's comments might be. So that adds, like, an aspect of, like, unreliable narrator that's kind of fun. Also, there is, every now and then, Wooten doing a radio play version of Captain Absolutely, which was kind of nice to see because it's been a bit.
Quite a bit, yes.
So Connie was in that, Jay was in that. Towards the end, before I forget to mention it, there's a character that's added to the storyline who's played by Jay, who, that character is married to Connie's character. That was weird.
Was weird. His name was the Troll.
That was weird. They're like, who are you? And I had to hear Jay Smouse say, I'm married to Connie Kendall. And I was like, I don't like that.
That's exactly what he said.
That's verbatim what the line was. He said, I, Jay Smouse, 14-year-old, am married to Connie Kendall, year old. And so, Buddy basically decides that he is going to get training from Wooten. They have some as you do in training montage
Standard
storyline.
Karate Kid fare.
Like Karate Kid references. There are things that Buddy has to do, such as being given a bunch of pies and saying which one he thinks would taste the best after hearing where the pies are from. Before eating one, he is pelted with like tomatoes or something like that.
And tennis balls, yeah.
And tennis balls. And he's supposed to, like, I think catch all the tennis balls and avoid the tomatoes or something like that. He just gets attacked, basically. What was the other one?
There was something that was cake. That was secret cake. There was a number of things.
There were a bunch of things. But I'm trying to remember what the cake one was.
It was like a football or something like that. It's like one of these things is secretly cake.
It was. He was given a couple things, and some of them were cake, and some of them weren't, and he had to guess which one was cake and which one wasn't.
Yes. I was like, that's a surprisingly like a referential trend thing to write in.
That surprised me. So throughout all this, Buddy's growing like more and more increasingly like frustrated with Jay. Jay's trying to give him criticism on his piece. Buddy's saying like, I don't need your help now. I'm getting help from Wooten. Buddy starts creating a character named the Troll, who is basically just like attacking Jay. And is very merciless. He's just like, we're gonna kill the troll and do all these things. And Wooten's like, calm down. They go on candid conversations with Connie at one point, and then Jay starts calling in and basically being like, oh, do you think you understand what you're talking about? And then they're like, Buddy sucks. Wooten's new character sucks. Get good. And then Wooten's just like, huh. Yeah, actually, I do need to work on my character. You're right. So Wooten does more tests with Buddy. He does the 3 specific ones that we just mentioned. And then Buddy's like, what was the point of that? The tennis ball and tomato one was that you're going to get a ton of like comments and pieces of criticism thrown towards your work as you go. Some of them are good pieces you want to take, and they're the tennis balls. Some are ones you want to avoid. Those are the tomatoes, because they don't have anything constructive to say. Because there's criticism and there's constructive criticism, and those are 2 very different things, which I will get into more once I'm done the summary. There is the pie test, where he's shown 3 different pies. One was from, we were just given an address. We didn't hear where. One was from Odyssey, one was from Wits End, and Connie made it. Mm-hmm. Where was the other one from?
Hell's Diner.
No, that was the address one.
Let me see. Jay's house.
Okay, one was from Jay's house.
1334 West.
Oh, it was from a pie store that is on the same street as Jay's house.
Oh, I thought they said that was Jay's house was the address.
No, it was from like a bakery or something like that, like a store on the same street as Jay's house.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. No, I think it was, because
that was one of the bad ones.
Yeah, and no, the reasoning made me so mad, because Buddy was just like, well, Connie is Connie, and I know how she cooks, so I'm not eating that. I will get food poisoning. And Wooten's like, that's smart. And then with the other pie, he's just like, that street that you said the pie is from is on the same street as where Jay lives.
No, because he said the street address. He said 1334 Westview Street is Jay's house.
I thought he said Jay's...
No, the pie came from Jay's house.
Okay,
Jay
I thought he
said
it came from the same...
No, I don't see why he would be like, I'm not eating a pie from Jay's street.
The thing is, I thought he said Jay lives... Or I bet Jay lives in a sketchy neighborhood or something like that. So the food is probably bad, so I'm not going to eat that. And I was just like, to which I yelled, in the car in front of Mom very, very loudly. His parents are rocket scientists. You really think he would live in a rundown neighborhood? He probably lives in a mansion. He probably lives in the house from Kim Possible. Like, although I guess her mom is a neurosurgeon. Or, no, a brain surgeon. Or
Which is a neurosurgeon.
Okay, yeah. And then the last one was Hell's Diner, which
Has
it's
pies.
been a little bit since
And
Hell's Diner.
now we know where
mentioned.
it is.
Yeah. I was sitting there and then
The
Wooten
corner
said, like,
of
'cause
East
this-
Hemming and Maine.
This address is Hell's Diner. I leaned over to Mom and I was like, watch Devin, wherever he is, like, just frantically type that out because I don't think we had the address for Hell's Diner.
Oh yeah, when they were like, he was like, this is Jay's address, and Wits End means Connie probably made it, and
okay,
when Connie's talking to Bill on the phone, and she was like, yeah, why are you calling me? Call an ambulance. But he was like the other one. I was like, Hell's Diner, and it was.
My hot take. Jay is a good cook.
I imagine so.
I feel like they've already established in the show at one point that Jay is a good cook.
Probably.
Or that he likes to cook, at least. I know I've said this a bunch of times before, but, like, I really like that Jay, like, almost all of his interests and hobbies are more, like, female, traditional, associated hobbies and stuff. I just like that. He's very, like,
I don't care what others think about me.
Unapologetic about what he likes, and he's very in touch with his feelings. And he is a therapist now, and I like him a lot. Mm-hmm. He is my child. So the last test, which is the
cake
that looks like other things, whatever, which apparently, like, Penny is really into that. So it's just like, I don't know if this is like a thing or like a sweet gesture. I don't know. I'm not gonna judge or comment. That was so the pie one was considered the source of the criticism. And what was the cake one again?
I don't remember.
It was like,
it can be hard to tell, like, it can be hard to tell from the surface, like, what is genuine criticism until you, like, dig in and examine it, something like that.
Yeah. I think that one was, like, more, like, reflecting on criticism and trying to figure out, like, if it had any worth or if it was just, like, really shallow or something like that.
I think the Tennis Balls and Tomatoes is, like, both good and bad criticism are coming at you at the same time, and so if you you can't close yourself off to the bad without also closing yourself off to the good. You have to try and catch the good while avoiding the bad.
So, like, I was just sitting there and I was in the car as we were driving home because I was a little worried about listening to a completely new episode with Mom because I said, like,
what if this is a raunchy episode?
No, I was like, I don't want, because, like, nowadays we don't really listen to Odyssey in the car very much together. We usually only do it on road trips.
Yes.
And, like, with Christina Lake, you only have time to listen to 2 episodes. And I knew Unrelatable was a good episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, I haven't listened to this one yet. I have to listen to it. I want to listen to an episode with you. I'm a little worried, what if it's a bad episode? Because the way of the comic book, I don't have a ton of faith in that title.
Yeah.
But I was just, like, sitting there and I was listening to it on the way back. And I was just like, this is a really good episode.
It's funny because, you know, it's like Wooten's making him do random stuff. And so you're like, obviously, this is a Karate Kid style thing where he's like, this is pointless. Why are you making me do this stuff? And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, it all had meaning. And you've been training me the whole time in unexpected ways. Like, you know, it's a very common trope. And what I was picturing in my mind was, you know, Wooten is throwing out all these different things he was getting Buddy to do. And I was like, okay, he's going to reveal how, like, all of these things teach you the same lesson in the end. What I was not expecting was for him to, like, itemize the different things he did and explain how each of them had a distinctly different lesson to them.
It was, and like, so much more multifaceted than I was prepared for.
Really impressed me, where I was like, oh, wow, That
I
was
was just
like,
sitting there and I heard like the first one, I was like, that's good. And I heard the second one, I was like, that's good. And he kept going. And I was just like, no, stop. My brain's already so full.
at the beginning of the episode, Captain absolutely builds a giant slingshot out of popsicles, or a slingshot or something like that, out of popsicle sticks, catapult. And I was like, I wonder where this idea
I never even thought
came
of the
to Wooten.
popsicle kid.
I wonder if this build a giant structure out of popsicle sticks came to him somewhere out of the past.
That's so sweet. That's a cute reference. I never thought about that.
I hope it was on purpose.
I hope it's a reference. I'm just going to say it is, and give them the point for that. So Wooten takes up Jay's constructive criticism about everything. He incorporates the troll character with some adjustments. They get Jay to help
Some
them
less ad
in
hominem
bringing the character to life in the radio drama that they're doing. And it all works out in the end. And Buddy basically says to Jay, like, you had some good ideas. I took some of your good ideas, and I appreciate that you were trying to help me. And then Jay's like, get me all these different food stuffs. And Buddy's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then the episode ends.
Obviously, it made me think a lot of Tales of a Small Town Thug, because it's like, that was our previous, like, episode about how to handle criticism and understanding, like, just because criticism is from someone you don't like doesn't mean it's not necessarily valid. Like,
this episode was so much deeper.
You should take it and consider the source, because maybe there is something valuable in there that you can take and apply to yourself, like Wit getting new pants. But yeah, I wasn't feeling much from this episode for most of it, and then Wooten at the end goes...
And the ending just hits you.
He was like, here's a good metaphor, and another one. He just nailed a ton of them back to back, and they were all slightly different and useful in different ways. And I was like, it took Tales of a Small Town Thug, and then it like added more depth to the lesson in terms of
Tales of a Small Town Thug walked so this could run.
It just added so many more dimensions to how you can examine and think about criticism that's thrown your way. And then Wooten at the end says to Connie, it's like, I've always thought you had a particularly evil voice. I was like, Wooten is always so savage.
Another really funny thing about this
Connie.
is because before listening to this, we listened to Unrelatable, which is also Wooten being very savage to Connie because he's one of like the 5 main characters in that episode. Or four main characters.
I feel like in particular lately, it's just been the string. It's so funny once I realized like Wooten has had a number of very savage burns over the years.
Wooten was like, I did one nice thing for Connie when her boyfriend died and her best friend ditched her. And that's paid off my toll for the rest of...
I don't think Wooten has ever made like such a harsh comment to anyone else except for Connie before. Like, I'm thinking of, we just had the End of the Snow quadrilogy where like Wooten hears the snowmobile coming in the distance. He hears like the engine backfiring, and he's like, oh, it's definitely Connie driving it. All the way back to like pre-hiatus.
Like, she's really pretty and funny.
Yeah, she talks all the time.
That's where it started, though.
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
the first episode. And that was after Novacom, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see the trend?
And she's really cool, and everyone likes her.
What was the other bit where it was like a more recent episode? Was it after Connie's
I don't remember, but yeah, I knew there was another recent thing.
Where like her and Wooten were bonding like in the same way. I don't remember
what it was, but yeah.
I think it was after June died, maybe.
I was thinking a lot more recent than that, but I don't know.
It could be more recent than that.
But yeah, sure. I was like, man, Wooten always just has it out. I mean...
I think he's counting on the fact that Connie isn't going to pick up on a lot of the insults.
That's worse.
So he's just like, I can insult her and Shimona's, which is also bad.
I just like to think that that's the relationship they have, is like the teasing insults, and that's why it's only Connie that he's saying it to, because he's not a mean person. He just has very specifically this relationship with Connie.
It's like he has all this like... He has this, like, strong cane instinct, but he barely ever sees Wellington, so he has to take it out on Connie.
It's like Jerry in Parks and Rec. It's like everyone's so nice to everyone, they have to take all of that concentrated like meanness
Yeah.
towards someone and just all direct it towards a narrow source. It's just one person in town is the scapegoat of everyone's ire.
It's so funny. It's, dare I say, I personally think it is the funniest running joke that Wooten's character currently has. Do you agree?
Yeah, and it's funny because I didn't really appreciate how consistently it was like a gag unto itself until this episode. Like we've commented on it a number of times, but I don't think it
Oh,
was
I've
until this.
noticed it. I've noticed
I know
it
we've
for
commented
sure.
like, man, he said that it wasn't until this one though where I really thought about like how it's persistent enough with only Connie that I was like, it's intentional, definitely.
It is intentional. It's
I think
really
before
funny.
now, I just thought like, oh, you know, different. Lots of people like to tease Connie. I think it was at this one where I was like, okay, they're clearly like it's on purpose that they're like,
Yeah.
keeps on saying these things to Connie.
Poor Connie. So
Doesn't
one thing I want to
Christmas
say
Conundrum
before,
also, I think, has.
and Drake the Cosmic Copper's first episode. So I think the reason why he can do it is not only because they're really close friends, but because they've had those close moments where Connie is like really going through something, and he also knows that like she'll be there for him when he's going through something. I can't think of any specific moments on the same level, but she was supporting him throughout the whole like Penny stuff.
Yeah,
a lot.
I mean, she's practically his sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Now that he's married to Penny.
Yeah. But like, oh, maybe that's why the Cain instinct is acting up. But that was happening before he got married to Penny. So
it's him snapping back at Connie's
revenge.
jealousy after Penny got married.
It's revenge for the fact that Connie made him pretend that they were getting married that one time when he was still into Penny, even though again he's been like this before that happened. But he never forgot. He never forgot in Something Blue Part 1.
Yeah.
That is when it happened.
So I have
something been new. Yes, that is what I meant. You knew what I meant.
Yeah. Something Blue is the...
Yeah, Something Blue is where they broke up.
Yeah.
Is where the tire iron thing happened. Because everything in this episode is getting mentioned at least 5 times before it gets dropped. If it gets dropped at all. So,
I didn't know that wedding poem until long after I heard those episodes. Like, I didn't
I learned it from the movie Bride Wars.
I learned it from Doctor Who, I think.
And
Series 5.
So I would have known it before those episodes. So I have been in 8 creative writing classes over the course of my post-secondary studies, because I had 4 years of just like my English major, and every single semester I did one creative writing class. And in literally every single one of those classes, there's always like a lot of time to talk about constructive criticism that is taken throughout the entire like course, but also especially like the first 2 classes. And then lots of other courses I've done that weren't creative writing also make you read a lot about constructive criticism, especially if you're doing like online discussions and you have to like comment on people's opinions. So that is to say, I've gotten so much training on how like to both give and take constructive criticism post high school. And so like me listening to Jay talk in this episode, I was like, Jay, honey, I love you. This is entirely a character, but you are, and I say this lovingly, he needs to work on how he gives out criticism. Because while lots of the things he was saying were technically constructive criticism, some of the things weren't constructive criticism. And everything he said, he voiced in like a very critical way. So basically the difference between constructive criticism and criticism, with constructive criticism, you're trying to help the person like become better at what they're trying to do and provide advice so that like the thing they're working on becomes better as a whole. Or maybe say like they're trying to write a character of like a particular race or nationality or like sexuality or gender or something like that they do not know much about, and they get something incorrect. Instead of just like screaming at them or something like that and being like, you don't know what you're talking about, all of this sucks, you might point out like, hey, this one sentence here and this sentence here is not something that that person would probably say for these reasons. And maybe you might want to check out like this website where these people talk about the things related to this topic. Or from my own personal experience, if you do have personal experience relating to this, you can say like, I think you could maybe put this for the character, or like this might be a better direction or something like that. It's like how you put out the ideas and how you explain everything is
Speak
such
the
a
truth in love.
big part of criticism. Exactly. It's like the phrase like, if you're not going to say anything nice, don't say it at all. Like, if you're going to critique someone...
If you're not going to say anything constructive, don't critique at all.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the reason why you're critiquing is obviously, like, if you didn't like something, it's because you wished it was better in some way. So instead of attacking the person, why not try to help them? If they're in a position where you can help. It could be like, I don't know, it could be like a movie or something like that, where the director obviously had bad intentions or did something in bad faith and knew they were doing it or something. At that point, like, I don't know, I'd still say like lean towards constructive criticism, but also like, no, actually always lean towards constructive criticism. I take that back. Because if you're going to say something like a definitive opinion that you have on something, I think you should be able to back it up with why you feel that way.
Another point about it, and this is something I see come up a lot on Twitter and stuff, due to its relation to like fan creative spaces with fan art and fanfics and stuff, is understand when criticism is desired or
That is a
asked
big
for.
thing too. Yes. If they don't want your opinion, don't give it. Especially if they specifically say they don't want your opinion on it.
Not every, even if you're like, oh, well, I'm being helpful and this is constructive, if it's not asked for, you don't just want to go on to anyone's work. You know, if someone just posts some art that they drew, that's not the place to go on and be like, I think you should improve this and your anatomy is off here. Like, even, you know, to gussy up your phrasing to make it sound nicer, like, you still need to understand where it's appropriate to offer unsolicited criticism, which also, is very rarely.
If you say, like, draw artwork of some characters that you might not like or something like that, but you like the artwork, don't just put like, hey, hate these characters but really like your art. Just say, I like your art. You don't need to put
yeah, you don't need to, there's no reason to add that.
You don't need to put that other bit. I used to
I loved it. I really like this art, and I can't even stand the show that you're drawing it from.
I used to say stuff like that. Not like necessarily, I think there might be a couple times where I've maybe said something like that.
It's understandable where it can come from, because you're trying to say, like, it's so good that my appreciation for it overcomes the fact that I don't, have any knowledge about the source material.
Yeah, once you get older, you basically have, like, the realization of just like, oh, wait, I can just keep that first part to myself. Like, I remember when I was younger, the first time I ever remember, like, really specifically doing this was I went to see this, like, 4-man group called, like, Cantabile or something like that. Mm-hmm. They were, like, a cappella singers with Mom. We saw them perform in Trail. They were so good. And, like, back when we were little, we used to go to shows in...
Sweet.
We went to shows with Mom, like, all the time in Trail and stuff. So there were lots of times where I would go do, like, a show in Trail, and I'd be like, oh, I'm probably not going to like this. And I might not have enjoyed it. And so then I'd go home and I'd be like, oh, I wish I could have stayed home, but I'm 7, so I can't do that. But I remember like not looking forward to the show and then really enjoying it and thinking it was really cool. And then they were like at the like stairs when you leave, and then everyone was like getting their CDs. We got their CD. We got them to sign it, and I remember saying I was like 8 or 7 or something like
Yeah, at
that,
least
and
you
I
were a
was like,
kid.
I was a kid, and I was just like, I really didn't want to come tonight because I didn't think I'd like this, but you guys were so good. I was like, you did so good, and I didn't think this would be good at all. And then they were just like, oh, thank you. And then mom like
When it
dragged me
comes from a
out.
young kid, I feel like the kids say the darndest thing. Appreciation like outweighs the
Yeah,
social faux pas.
I hope so. I remember like I would listen to that album like all the time when I got back home. Um, but yeah, I don't do that anymore.
It's good.
I'm glad about that. Another thing of criticism is, which I still need to work on a little bit, is know when to shut up and stop talking about the thing. Because I think I can pretty safely say you also have this problem a little bit when it comes to certain
Wait, are
things.
you saying then when it comes to critiquing and analyzing media that we both have a tendency to talk for too long?
No, I'm saying with episodes like the A Change of Heart
Mm-hmm.
and Tech the Halls and stuff.
Uh-huh.
There needs to be a
Or you
time
just
where
let
we
it
just
go.
we lay them to rest.
Yes, I agree.
Where we know our opinions aren't going to change, but that doesn't mean we need to keep mentioning them.
Yes, there's no
I
sense.
realized that the first time we talked to Kathy. I realized like we talk about Tech the Halls far too much.
Sometimes you say your piece and then you leave it be.
Yes. Sometimes you bury the episode and then you just leave it there, and then you lay flowers and you say,
You let the grass grow.
I'm not going to see you again, and you leave it and you don't go back.
Yeah. Yes, it's hard too when you create content like we do where you're trying to be funny because uh, calling back to things you talked about before can be humorous, and so it is hard to try and figure out sometimes where to strike the balance between
Yeah.
it's a running joke, so this is funny, and
Yeah.
beating a dead horse.
Yeah, there's like hyperbole to be funny, and then accidental hyperbole where it gets to the point where it's like, oh, this might be a little hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to back up a little bit. But yeah, I was thinking when I was listening to this episode though, like, how funny would it be if we didn't like the episode about like criticism?
This
It made
episode
me
can't stop me because I can't listen.
it made me think of that M. Night Shyamalan movie, Lady in the Water,
Uh-huh.
where one of the main characters is a critic and then just like is trashed on for the entire movie, and it's just like everything in this fantasy setting is so unrealistic, he says as he gets like killed and eaten by a monster. Basically, I don't know how much you remember about
A little bit.
that movie's existence.
I remember that movie in particular really played into like every one of these characters needs to have a quirk because that's how characters work.
Yeah, there's like my favorite character is the one guy who only exercises the one arm.
Uh-huh.
So it's like really buff, and the other one's just like normal. And so, yeah, whenever I think of just like critiques of critics, I usually think of Lady in the Water. But yeah, I really, really liked this episode. I thought it handled the topic extremely well. And yeah, I really thought it was good in a lot of aspects. I think my only complaint is the fact that I thought it was weird that they made Jay's character married to Connie's character. That made me
I didn't give it a thought at all because they were both
That
doing
made me
voices, and
uncomfortable.
so it's
Yeah.
um
I'm just thinking like if I was like a 14-year-old and I was just like, bruh, my character is married to this like
I mean,
33.
Jay's played characters of all different ages in audio
I
stuff
know.
before, so I really didn't think about it.
I
He's
know,
done
but-
tons of acting. Connie's
Because
done tons of acting.
we also talked about it a lot when Eugene played that character who was trying to romance Jules.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that feels a bit different.
But they're the same age. Connie and Eugene are like the same age, and Jules and Jay are the
yeah,
same
but
age.
I would say the relationship between the characters is different in a way that stands out more. I'd say it's also, that was a stage production. This is an
Oh
audio
yeah, that's
drama,
true.
so that's one aspect. People are
That is
looking at them in
true.
real life, and also the fact that it's like, this is my son's girlfriend versus like, hey, this is a kid at wit's end.
That's fair.
So this is the 100th episode in the club.
Ooh,
So the web
that was
doc,
a good 100th episode. Good job,
the web
AIO.
doc was just like a big clip show of bits from previous web docs over the last many years.
I was about to do it again. I was about to mention some past episodes of the club that we didn't enjoy, that we've ragged on a lot.
But you won't because
I won't. I'll just type it to you in chat. I'm not gonna say it out loud though.
I'm gonna give this episode a 4.4 out of.
I don't remember the name of the episode. You know what episode I'm talking about, though.
4.4 out of 5, I think.
This is me working on things. I didn't say it out loud, but Devin still knows what I meant. One step closer to fixing the problem.
Going through a Jeff Ramsey development of like, I realize at this stage in my life that maybe sometimes, like I just had this revelation, is sometimes I can think of a joke and not say it out loud so people don't get mad at me. At 40-something years old.
Well, I'm doing good then, because I'm not 40. So I'm going to give this one...
And now the lore people writing down their notes like, we're one step closer to deducing Victoria's age.
Because I've definitely...
She's not 40.
I definitely have not said my age in past episodes.
Definitely not.
Or the fact that I was
probably.
celebrating my birthday a week ago. I'm going to give it a 4.5. I think it was really good. What did you give it again?
4.4.
Yeah. I'm good with my rating.
That is all for next time. And next time, based on what we learned at the start of this episode, I think I know what we should be talking about next time.
Are we gonna do the...
No, I mean, 28 hours.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, if it's coming out, then we should be talking about it. So
we should be talking about it. After that, though, you should...
Me getting on Twitter, like, why isn't anyone talking about this?
Why isn't anyone talking about 2 hours?
Why isn't anyone talking about the new...
Asterisk, 28 hours.
So,
also, really quick, before I forget, all the different levels of criticism and, like, ways they explained are very comprehensive and really good explanations and easy to imagine. And learning all those different aspects about criticism is so valuable for a kid or a teenager. And, like, the only one I really knew when I was a kid was consider the source. I didn't completely understand it, but it did help me feel a little bit better when I could stare at bullies who were blatantly insulting me to my face and say, have you ever heard of consider the source? And then they'd look dumbfounded and they go, no, what does that mean? I just smile at them and then I turn around.
you were like, got him.
Got him. But yeah, I think it's good for kids to learn those things, especially if they're being bullied when they're kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's going to make all the problems go away, but...
No.
Yeah. Critical thinking skills are always good to have, especially in this day and age.
Agreed.
So, 73. I'm excited.
I am also excited.
We get our Jillian content. We've been starved, and now we're finally going to be fed. Please let her be in every episode.
I've waited for so long.
I've waited so long for this. I've waited 84 years. Plop. Finally gets Jillian after looking for her.
Drops her into the ocean. So that's all for this time. Thank you for joining us on our side of YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blacker.
And I'm still thinking about that lady from Titanic.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.